I will never forget that day in Madrid. The morning sun streamed through the enormous windows of the meeting room, illuminating the imposing oak table. I, Clara Fernandez, CEO of Innovations Ibéricas, a company I had helped build from scratch, was preparing for the most important meeting of the quarter. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the tension in the air as board members, attorneys, and my executive team took their seats. My husband, Daniel, sat next to me, his suit impeccable and his smile confident. His mother, Elvira, took her place in front of us, with that air of superiority that always accompanied her. Despite the presence of my in-laws, I felt safe. This was my arena, my time to shine and secure the future of the company with new investors. I began my presentation with the confidence that characterized me. The figures were promising. Our renewable energy projects were taking off throughout the Iberian Peninsula. He could feel himself catching the attention of everyone present. The murmur of approval that ran through the room gave me wings. He was about to move on to the budget discussion when the unthinkable happened. Daniel stood up suddenly, interrupting my speech. The sudden movement caused some papers to fall to the floor. I froze, the words dying in my throat as I looked at my husband, confused. "I'm divorcing you," Daniel announced, his voice cold and sharp as steel. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, racing with surprise and betrayal. Before he could react, Elvira stood up, her voice echoing through the room. "Security," he barked. "Escort this despicable woman out of here. Throw her out onto the street where she belongs." I felt heat rising to my cheeks, humiliation and anger fighting for control. All eyes were on me, waiting for my reaction. But something inside me hardened. With icy resolve, I decided to remain seated, the picture of composure. The seconds that followed seemed eternal. My mind was racing at a mile an hour, remembering every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every difficult decision I had made to get Innovations Ibéricas to where it was today. How dare they try to take away everything I had fought for? I looked around the room, taking in the familiar faces of my colleagues and employees. Some seemed as surprised as I was, others avoided my gaze, uncomfortable. How many of them knew about this ambush? How many were on my side? I took a deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story they had so carefully planned. With deliberately slow movements, I reached for a folder lying on the table. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my next move. I opened the folder and took out a set of documents. The weight of what I was about to do gave me a cold, electrifying voice. "Are you divorcing me?" I began, my voice ringing clear and authoritative in the room. For the first time since Daniel's announcement, I stood up, locking my eyes with his. "Then I guess this is the perfect time for you to know, you're fired." With a defiant movement, I threw the termination papers directly at Daniel's face. The sound of paper hitting his face echoed in the silent room. The expressions of surprise multiplied, and I could see Daniel's carefully rehearsed plan unravel before his eyes. "What the hell are you talking about, Clara?" he stammered, his confidence visibly crumbling. I didn't give him time to recover. "This isn't just the day of your divorce, Daniel. It's the day of your unemployment. You've been using company funds for personal luxuries and engaging in unapproved transactions with our competitors. I've found the evidence, and so has the board of directors." My icy delivery left him frozen in place. I saw how Elvira's arms, always so sure of themselves, trembled visibly as she gritted her teeth, realizing that the family empire was slipping out of her hands. The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. No one dared to move, everyone focused on the drama that was unfolding before their eyes. But I wasn't done. I had years of frustration and resentment built up, and now that I had started, I wasn't going to stop. "Did you think you could get rid of me so easily, Daniel?" I continued, my voice heavy with suppressed emotion. "Did you think that because you carry the family name, you could just fire me like I was just another employee? You forgot something very important. I built this company as much as you, if not more." I watched as realization hit Daniel and Elvira. Their faces went from confidence to disbelief, and finally to fear. They had seriously underestimated my determination and cunning. 4 years, I continued, now addressing the entire room, I have worked tirelessly to make Innovations Ibéricas what it is today. While some, I looked directly at Daniel, were more concerned with keeping up appearances and enjoying the benefits. I was in the trenches, closing deals, innovating, making sure every cog in this machine worked perfectly. I could see how my words resonated with board members and my executive team. Many of them had witnessed my dedication over the years. Others seemed to be re-evaluating their perception of me at that very moment. And now, I concluded, my voice filled with determination, I will not allow anyone, not even the family I thought was mine, to take away what I have worked so hard to build. The atmosphere in the room had changed. What started as an ambush had become my moment of triumph. I could feel the balance of power tipping in my favor with every word I spoke. As the Madrid sun continued to shine through the windows, illuminating the room in a way that now seemed symbolic, I realized that this was not the ending that Daniel and Elvira had planned. It was the beginning of a new era for Innovations Ibéricas, an era in which I would be firmly at the helm, free of the manipulations and power games that had plagued my marriage and my career up to that point. The meeting that should have been ordinary had become a turning point in my life. And as I prepared for what would come next, I knew one thing for certain: I would never again allow anyone to make me feel small or insignificant. It was time for Clara Fernandez to take the reins of her destiny, both personal and professional. The silence that followed my statement was brief but intense. I could feel the tension in the air, almost palpable, as everyone in the room processed what had just happened. Daniel, my now ex-husband, seemed to have lost all his previous arrogance. His face had gone pale, and for a moment, he looked like he was going to collapse in his chair. Elvira, on the other hand, was not willing to give up so easily. With a scream of rage, she lunged toward me, but 2 of the security guards intercepted her before she could reach me. "Let go of me," he shouted, struggling against them. "This bitch can't do this. It's our company." I remained calm, aware that every pair of eyes in the room was on me. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let Elvira's outburst derail me from the course I had charted. "Elvira," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I suggest you calm down. You don't want to add assault to the list of reasons you're being escorted out of the building." I watched as his eyes widened at the realization of what was happening. For the first time in all the years I had known her, Elvira looked truly scared. I turned to the board of directors and investors, who had remained silent throughout the altercation. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "I deeply regret this interruption. As you can see, we have had to take drastic measures to protect the interests of Innovations Ibéricas. Let me explain the situation to you in detail." As he spoke, I noticed that Daniel had finally found his voice. "Clara," he said, his tone a mix of pleading and threat, "you can't do this. Think of everything we've built together." I looked at him, allowing myself for the first time to show all the disappointment and pain he had caused me. "What we've built together, Daniel? Do you mean the company you've been ransacking for your personal whims? Or maybe the marriage you were so eager to end a few minutes ago?" I watched him flinch at my words, and for a moment, I felt a pang of pity. But I pushed her away quickly. I couldn't allow myself to be weak, not now. As I was saying, I continued, addressing the board again, "We have discovered significant financial irregularities in the company's accounts. Thanks to the diligence of our internal audit team, we have evidence that funds have been diverted for personal use and unauthorized transactions have been carried out with our competitors." I paused, letting my words sink in. I could see the surprise and concern on the board members' faces. Some looked angry, others confused. But everyone was listening attentively. "I understand this is a shock to everyone," I continued. "Believe me, it was for me too when I discovered it. But as CEO of this company, my duty is to protect our interests and those of our shareholders. That is why I have made the decision to remove Daniel from his position and block Elvira's access to the company's accounts." A murmur of approval ran through the room. I could see several of the board members nodding their heads. It was gaining ground. "Clara," Elvira's voice sounded desperate now, "you can't do this. We're family." I turned to her, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions. On the one hand, This woman had been like a mother to me for years. On the other, I had always felt his thinly veiled contempt, his conviction that I would never be good enough for his precious son or his precious company. "You're right, Elvira," I said softly. "We're family. Or at least, I thought we were. But family doesn't try to destroy each other. Family doesn't conspire behind your back to take away everything you've worked for." I saw her eyes fill with tears, but I forced myself to stand firm. I couldn't let emotional manipulation derail me from my path. "I assure you," I continued, addressing the board again, "that we will take all necessary steps to rectify this situation. Our legal team is already preparing a lawsuit to recover the diverted funds, and we are implementing new financial controls to ensure that this doesn't happen again." One of the board members, an older man named Javier, cleared his throat. "Clara," he said, his voice deep and serious, "can you assure us that this will not negatively affect our operations or our reputation in the market?" I nodded, grateful for the question. "Of course, Javier. In fact, I believe that in the long run, this will strengthen our position. It shows that we are willing to take difficult measures to maintain the integrity of our company, even when it means facing our own family members." I watched as several board members nodded in approval. He was regaining control of the situation. "In addition," I continued, "I have a detailed plan to restructure our management and improve our operational efficiency. If you will allow me, I would like to present it to you now." As I prepared to begin my presentation, I noticed that Daniel finally seemed to have snapped out of his stupor. He stood up, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "You won't get away with this, Clara," he growled. "I have connections, I have influence. I will destroy you." For a moment, I felt a pang of fear. He knew Daniel wasn't bluffing, he really had powerful connections in the business world of Madrid. But I forced myself to stay calm. "Daniel," I said, my voice cold as ice, "I suggest you think very carefully about your next moves. Any attempt to sabotage this company will only worsen your legal situation." I watched as realization settled on his face. He finally seemed to understand the seriousness of his situation. "Security," I called, "please escort Mr. Rodriguez and Mrs. Rodriguez out of the building. Make sure they hand over their key cards and any company property they may have with them." As the guards approached Daniel and Elvira, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, anger, all mixed together in a confusing whirlwind. But above all, I felt a fierce determination. He had won this battle, but he knew that the war was just beginning. As the doors closed behind Daniel and Elvira, I turned to the meeting with renewed energy. "Now," I said, "let me show you how we are going to lead Innovations Ibéricas into a brighter, more prosperous future." As I began my presentation, I felt a surge of confidence. I had overcome the worst crisis of my professional and personal life, and I had come out stronger. I knew the days and weeks ahead would be difficult, filled with legal and business challenges. But she also knew she was prepared to face them. I looked around the room at the attentive faces of the board of directors and my executive team. These were my allies now, the people I would have to trust as we navigated the turbulent waters that lay ahead. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice full of conviction, "today marks the beginning of a new era for Innovations Ibéricas. An era of transparency, integrity, and sustainable growth. Together, we will not only overcome this crisis, but we will emerge stronger than ever." And as I began to outline my vision for the future of the company, I sensed that a new Clara Fernandez was emerging. A Clara stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to succeed, no matter the obstacles that stood in her way. As I continued with my presentation, explaining the plans for the future of Innovations Ibéricas, I couldn't help but feel a mix of adrenaline and anxiety. I knew the worst was not over yet. Elvira was not one to give up easily, and she was sure she would try to fight back. I wasn't wrong. Barely 10 minutes had passed when the doors to the meeting room burst open. Elvira burst into the room, closely followed by two men I recognized as high-profile lawyers from Madrid. "This is an outrage," Elvira shouted, her voice echoing through the room. "I will not allow this upstart to take from us what is rightfully ours." I felt all eyes turn to me, waiting for my reaction. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. This was another test, and she was determined to pass it. Elvira, I said, my voice firm but controlled, I thought I made it clear that you are no longer welcome in these facilities. If you have any matters to discuss, you can do so through our attorneys. One of the lawyers accompanying Elvira took a step forward. Ms. Fernandez, he began, his tone professional but with a hint of threat, I represent the Rodriguez family. I must inform you that your actions today constitute a serious violation of the company's bylaws. We demand the immediate reinstatement of Mr. Daniel Rodriguez to his position and the annulment of all decisions made at this meeting. I felt a knot in my stomach, but I forced myself to keep a neutral expression. I had anticipated this move and was prepared. Sir. I paused, inviting him to introduce himself. Gomez, he responded. Alfonso Gomez, of Gomez y Asociados. I nodded, recognizing the name of one of the most prestigious law firms in Spain. Mr. Gomez, I appreciate your concern. However, I must inform you that all actions taken today are fully supported by the law and our company's bylaws. I motioned to my assistant, who quickly distributed a set of documents to everyone present, including Elvira's lawyers. As you can see, I continued, we have irrefutable evidence of misappropriation of funds and abuse of power by Mr. Rodriguez. Additionally, the board of directors voted unanimously last night to remove him from his position and appoint me sole CEO of Innovations Ibéricas. I saw Elvira's eyes widen upon hearing this. Clearly, he had not anticipated that I could have planned everything so meticulously. That's impossible, Elvira snapped. You can't have called a board meeting without our knowledge. I smiled, feeling a small satisfaction at seeing his confusion. Oh, but we could, Elvira. You see, while you and Daniel were busy plotting my downfall, I was building alliances and gaining the board's trust. Turns out, I'm not the only one who was worried about the direction the company was taking. Under the leadership of Daniel, I turned to the board members, who until now had remained silent, watching the exchange. Gentlemen, do any of you want to corroborate what I just said? To my relief, several board members nodded and murmured their confirmation. Javier, the oldest member, stood up. It's true, he said, his deep voice filling the room. We have been concerned about Daniel's management for months. When Clara presented us with evidence of his illegal activities, we had no choice but to act. The vote was unanimous. I watched as Elvira's face went from confidence to disbelief and finally to fury. Traitors, he shouted. All of you. How dare you turn your back on the family that built this company? Elvira, I intervened, my voice soft but firm, we all built the company. Every employee, every investor, every member of the board has contributed to making Innovations Ibéricas what it is today. And it is precisely out of respect for that effort collective that we cannot allow a single person to put it in danger because of their greed. I saw how my words impacted not only Elvira, but everyone present. Even the lawyers seemed uncomfortable, realizing that their position was weaker than they had anticipated. Elvira, however, was not willing to give up. With a quick movement, he pulled out his phone and began dialing a number. This is not over, he threatened. I have connections in the government, in the media. I will destroy you, Clara. I will destroy this company before I let you control it. At that moment, I felt something inside me harden. He had tried to handle this with diplomacy, but Elvira had crossed a line. Elvira, I said, my voice now cold as ice, I suggest that you think very carefully about what you are about to do. Any attempt to sabotage this enterprise will be considered a criminal act, and I assure you that you will face the full force of the law. I approached her, my voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. And as for your connections, do you really think I haven't thought about that? I have my own dossier, Elvira. Years of suspicious transactions, political favors, covert bribes. If you try anything against me or this company, everything will come to light. Are you willing to risk everything for your wounded pride? I watched as the color drained from his face. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. I knew I had one. I turned to the lawyers. Gentlemen, I believe we are done here. If you have any further concerns, you may schedule a meeting with our legal department. For now, I ask that you escort Ms. Rodriguez out of the building. To my surprise, The lawyers did not protest. They could see that the situation had changed dramatically and that their client was in a much weaker position than they had anticipated. As Elvira was escorted from the room, her threats now reduced to incoherent murmurs, I felt a wave of relief mixed with deep sadness. This woman had been like a mother to me for years, and now we were sworn enemies. I turned to the board and investors, aware that I still had to prove myself as a leader. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice regaining its professional tone, "I deeply regret these interruptions. I know that you have witnessed events that would not normally occur in a boardroom. But I assure you that from now on, Innovations Ibericas will operate with the highest integrity and professionalism." I saw approving nods around the table. He had passed the test. "Now," I continued, "if you will allow me, I would like to resume our discussion about the future of the company. I have some exciting ideas that I believe will drive our growth in the coming years." As I began to outline my plans, I felt a new confidence rising within me. I had faced the worst that Elvira and Daniel could throw at me, and I had emerged victorious. I knew the days and weeks ahead would be difficult, filled with legal and business challenges. But she also knew she was prepared to face them. I looked around the room at the attentive faces of the board of directors and investors. These were my allies now, the people I would have to trust as we navigated the turbulent waters that lay ahead. And as my presentation continued, I felt that a new Clara Fernandez was emerging. A Clara stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to succeed, no matter what obstacles stood in her way. The future of Innovations Ibericas was in my hands, and I was determined to take it to new heights. As the door closed behind Elvira and her lawyers, I felt the air in the room become lighter. However, he knew that this was far from over. I looked around at the expectant faces of the board of directors and investors. Everyone was waiting to see how he would handle the rest of this crisis. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice firm but tired, "I thank you for your patience during these unexpected events. I know you have many questions, and I assure you that they will all be answered. But first, I think we deserve a short rest. I suggest we take 15 minutes to compose ourselves and then continue with our meeting." I saw relieved nods around the table. We all needed a moment to process what had just happened. As the board members and investors left the room, I approached the window. From there, I could see the bustling center of Madrid, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this building. I wondered what Daniel and Elvira were doing right now. I didn't have to wait long to get a response. Barely 5 minutes after everyone had left, the door burst open. Daniel staggered in, his face red with anger and, he suspected, alcohol. "Clara," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "How could you do this to me? To my mother?" I slowly turned to face him, aware that this could be another turning point. "Daniel," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I thought you understood that you are no longer welcome here." He laughed, a bitter, desperate sound. "Welcome? This is my company. My family built it." I took a step towards him, feeling a mix of pity and frustration. "Daniel, your family may have founded it, but I helped build it. Every contract we signed, every innovation we implemented, every crisis we overcame. I was there, working tirelessly while you took the credit." I saw his eyes cloud over with a mix of confusion and anger. It was like, for the first time, I was really seeing who I was and what I had done for the company. But you're my wife," he stammered. "You're supposed to support me." "No. Not this." I felt something break inside me. Years of pent-up frustration and resentment came to the surface. "Your wife," I blurted out. "The same wife you were going to divorce today? The same one you were planning to throw out on the street with nothing?" Daniel recoiled as if I had physically hit him. I didn't want it to be like this," he murmured. "And what did you want it to be, Daniel?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Did you think I would just leave quietly? That I would give up everything I've worked for just because you and your mother decided to?" I watched as realization began to settle on his face. The alcohol seemed to be dissipating, replaced by a cold, hard sobriety. "My mother," he said suddenly. "Where is my mother?" I sighed, feeling the weight of the day's events. "She left, Daniel. She tried to intervene, but, well, Let's just say it didn't go the way she expected. I saw panic grow in his eyes. What did you do to him? He demanded. I didn't do anything to him, I replied calmly. I simply showed him that his intimidation tactics no longer work on me, and that I have proof of all of his questionable activities over the years. Daniel slumped into a chair, all his previous bravado gone. This can't be happening, he muttered. Everything is falling apart. For a moment, I felt a pang of compassion. This man, who she had once loved, seemed so lost and defeated. But I forced myself to remember everything he had done, everything he had planned to do to me. Daniel, I said softly, this didn't have to be this way. If you had been honest, if you had valued my contribution to the company, we could have found a way to part ways amicably. But you chose betrayal and greed. He looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and resentment. And what about you? He snapped. You think you're better than us? Look what you've done. You've destroyed your family by power. I felt anger rising inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. No, Daniel. I didn't do it for power. I did it for justice. For all the years of hard work that you and your mother tried to erase. I did it for every employee of this company who depends on us for their livelihood. I did it because it was the right thing to do. I watched my words hit him, each one like a punch to the gut. Finally, he seemed to collapse completely. What am I going to do now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a wave of contradictory emotions. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to remember the good times we had shared. But another part, the part that had been betrayed and underestimated for years, stood firm. That's up to you, Daniel, I said. You can keep fighting, try to destroy me and this company. Or you can accept that you have lost and move on with your life. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face for something. Compassion? Sorry. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. And my mother? He finally asked. I sighed. Your mother will have to face the consequences of her actions, just like you. But Daniel, you have to understand something. You are no longer a child. You can't continue depending on her to fix your problems. I saw how those words hit him hard. It was as if, for the first time, he was seeing the truth of his relationship with Elvira. At this moment, the door opened again. Elvira entered, her face a mask of barely contained fury. But when she saw Daniel sitting there, defeated, something in her changed. Daniel, he said, his voice unusually soft. What are you doing here? Daniel looked up, and I saw a mix of emotions cross his face. Shame, anger, fear. Mother, he said, his voice breaking. I've lost everything. Elvira turned to me, her eyes filled with hate. See what you've done, he hissed. You have destroyed my son. I felt my patience finally running out. No, Elvira, I said, my voice firm. You destroyed him. With years of manipulation, making him believe he was untouchable. You failed him as a mother by not teaching him responsibility and integrity. I watched my words hit her, each one leaving a visible mark. For a moment, she looked like she was going to fight back, but then something in her collapsed. Daniel, he said, turning to his son. Get up. We're leaving here. But Daniel didn't move. No, mother, he said, his voice surprisingly firm. Not anymore. I saw the surprise on Elvira's face, quickly followed by anger. What do you mean not anymore? He demanded. Daniel stood up slowly, facing his mother for what seemed like the first time in his life. I mean, I won't blindly follow your orders anymore. Look where that's gotten us. Elvira recoiled as if she had been slapped. Are you siding with her? She asked, incredulously. No, Daniel replied. I'm not taking anyone's side. For the first time, I'm trying to think for myself. I saw how those words impacted Elvira. His entire facade of control and superiority crumbled in an instant. I stood there, watching mother and son confront each other, years of dysfunctional family dynamics coming to the surface. It was painful to watch, but I also felt a strange sense of closure. Finally, Daniel turned to me. Clara, he said, his voice tired but determined, I'm sorry. For everything. I know it probably doesn't mean much right now, but I'm sorry. I nodded, unable to find the right words at that moment. "We'll leave now," he continued. "And we will not cause more problems. I promise you." I saw how he took his mother's arm, guiding her gently towards the door. Elvira seemed to be shocked, unable to process what was happening. While they went out, I felt a mixture of emotions: relief, sadness. When the door closed behind Daniel and Elvira, I felt as if a huge weight had risen from my shoulders. I stayed there for a moment, looking at the closed door, processing everything that had happened in the last hours. It was difficult to believe that this morning I had awakened as Daniel's wife, and now I was here, having overthrown the entire Rodriguez family of the company they had controlled for decades. The sound of steps approaching took me out of my thoughts. I turned to see Javier, the oldest member of the board of directors, entering the room. "Clara," he said, his voice mixed with concern and admiration, "are you okay?" We saw Daniel and Elvira leave. They seemed, well, defeated. I nodded slowly, allowing me a little smile. "I'm fine, Javier. It has been an intense morning, but I think we have finally overcome the worst." Javier approached, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You have handled all this with incredible grace and strength, Claire. I must admit that when this meeting began, I had my doubts about whether you could handle the pressure to lead Iberian innovations on your own. But now, well, I think I speak throughout the board when I say you have proven to be more than capable." His words filled me with a mixture of pride and relief. I had fought so much and for so long to recognize my value. To listen to that validation from Javier meant more than he could express. "Thank you, Javier," I said, my voice a little trembling for emotion. "That means a lot to me. But you know that I could not have done this without the support of the board. Your confidence in me, especially last night when I presented the tests against Daniel, it was crucial." Javier nodded, a comprehensive smile on his face. "Well, I think it's time for us to return to the boardroom. The others are waiting, and I think we are all eager to listen to your plans for the future of the company." I breathed deeply, preparing to face the rest of the board and investors. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the opportunity to demonstrate that he was more than capable of leading Iberian innovations towards a brilliant future. While we were walking back to the boardroom, I felt a wave of trust to travel my body. She was no longer Daniel's submissive wife or Elvira's obedient daughter-in-law. It was Clara Fernandez, CEO of one of the most important companies in Spain, and was ready to assume that role with everything that entailed. Upon entering the room, all the eyes turned to me. I could see a mixture of emotions on their faces: curiosity, expectation, and yes, still some apprehension. I knew I had to dissipate any remaining questions and demonstrate that it was the leader that Iberian innovations needed. I went to the front of the room, taking my place at the head of the table. For a moment, I allowed myself to enjoy the view. This was my table now, my boardroom, my company. I had worked tirelessly for years to reach this point, and now that I was here, I was determined to make it worth it. "Ladies and gentlemen," I started, my clear and safe voice, "first of all, I want to thank you for your patience and understanding during this morning's events. I know that this is how they expected this meeting to take place, and I deeply appreciate their professionalism and support." I saw nods around the table, and that gave me the courage to continue. As everyone knows, the latest events have resulted in significant changes in the leadership structure of Iberian innovations. Daniel Rodriguez is no longer associated with the company, and I will assume the role of CEO alone. I know that this may seem like a drastic change, but I want to assure you that I am more than prepared to assume this responsibility. I paused, allowing my words to settle. Then I continued, my voice full of passion and conviction. "During the last 10 years, I have worked tirelessly together with each of you to make Iberian innovations what it is today. I have been on the front line of each important project, each critical negotiation, every strategic decision. I know this company from within to outside, and I have a clear vision of where we should go from here." I saw how interest was turned on in the eyes of those present. Even those who had looked skeptical at first now leaned forward, eager to listen more. In the coming months, we will implement a series of changes designed to optimize our operations and accelerate our growth. First, we will restructure our R&D department to focus more on sustainable technologies. The renewable energy market is booming, and we have the opportunity to position ourselves as leaders in this field. I paused to take a sip of water, noticing with satisfaction that several members of the board were taking notes furiously. Secondly, we will expand our presence in Latin America. Our market studies indicate an enormous growth potential in that region, and we already have key contacts in several countries that are eager to collaborate with us. I saw nods of approval around the table. He knew that international expansion had been a topic of discussion for years, but Daniel had always been reluctant to make the leap. Now, we finally had the opportunity to do it. Last but not least, we will implement a new internal talent development program. Our people are our most valuable asset, and it is time for us to seriously invest in its growth and development. While I continued to delineate my plans, I could see how enthusiasm grew in the room. The questions began to arrive, more and more specific and focused. It was clear that he had captured his attention and imagination. After almost 2 hours of presentation and discussion, we finally reached the end of the meeting. Javier stood up, a broad smile on his face. "Clara," he said, his voice full of admiration, "I think I speak for everyone when I say you have overcome our expectations. Your vision for the future of Iberian innovations is exciting and bold, exactly what we need at this time." Other members of the board joined, expressing their support and enthusiasm. Even investors, who had been nervous at the beginning of the meeting, now seemed completely convinced. While the room was emptied slowly, with people dating small groups, arguing animatedly about the plans I had just presented, I allowed a moment of reflection. It had been a long and exhausting day, full of more drama and emotion than I would have ever expected. But here it was, in the end, victorious and stronger than ever. Javier approached me once again before leaving. "Clara," he said quietly, "I know that this day has not been easy for you. Losing your political family, facing your husband. It must have been a heartbreaking. But I want you to know that you have won a new family here." His words moved me deeply. "Thank you, Javier," I replied, feeling that the tears threatened to sprout. "That means more than you can imagine." When I finally left the boardroom, the building was mostly empty. The afternoon sun leaked through the windows, bathing the halls with a golden light. I stopped for a moment in front of the office that had belonged to Daniel until this morning. Tomorrow, I thought, that would be my office. Tomorrow would begin a new era for Iberian innovations, an era of innovation, growth and integrity. And I would be headed, leading the way. While walking towards the elevator, I felt a mixture of emotions: pride for what he had achieved, sadness for what he had lost, and above all, a burning determination of making each sacrifice worth it. The elevator came with a soft tintineo, and while entering, I allowed myself a last look at the office that would soon be mine. "Prepare, world," I muttered for myself, a smile curving my lips. "Clara Fernandez is ready to conquer." The elevator doors closed, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. And while descending to the ground floor, towards a future full of possibilities, I knew with certainty that was ready for any challenge that awaited me. The days following the meeting passed in an activity whirlwind. Every morning, when entering the imposing Iberian Innovations building in the heart of Madrid, I felt a mixture of emotion and responsibility. The company's logo, which I had seen before me a symbol of the Rodriguez dynasty, now represented a new beginning, a promise of change and progress. My new office, previously Daniel's domain, felt strangely big at the beginning. But with every day that passed, I was doing it more mine. I replaced the ostentatious works of art that Daniel preferred with photographs of our most innovative and successful projects. Each image was a reminder of what we had achieved and what we could still achieve. One morning, while reviewing the reports of the first month under my leadership, I heard a soft blow to the door. It was Maria, my assistant, with an expression of concern on her face. "Clara," he said, his hesitant voice, "there is someone here to see you." It's Elvira." I felt my heart accelerated. I had not seen or heard anything from Elvira since that fateful day in the boardroom. What could want now? "Make it pass, Maria," I said, straightening in my chair and preparing me for whatever Elvira could bring. Elvira entered the office, and I was surprised to see how much I had changed in such a short time. The proud and dominant woman she knew had been replaced by someone who seemed smaller, more fragile. His eyes, however, were still acute and observers as always. "Clara," he said, his smooth voice. Then he remembered. "Thank you for receiving me." "Of course, Elvira," I replied, telling him to take a seat. "How can I help you?" Elvira sat down, his hands twisting nervously in his lap. "I came to apologize," he finally said. The words seemed to cost him a great effort. "For everything. By how we treat you, Daniel and I, for trying to take away the company, for everything." I was speechless for a moment. Of all the things I hoped to hear from Elvira, an apology was the last thing I would have imagined. "I appreciate that, Elvira," I said finally. "But I have to ask, what has changed?" Elvira sighed deeply. "Everything has changed, Clara. Daniel, well, after what happened here, he collapsed. He finally realized how much it depended on me, on the company, of you. He is in rehabilitation now, trying to find himself sane." I felt a compassion stab. Despite everything that had happened, a part of me was still worried about Daniel. "And I," Elvira continued, "I have had a lot of time to reflect. I realized that in my eagerness to protect the family's legacy, I lost sight of what really mattered. I underestimate you, Claire. We all did it. And we pay the price for it." I reclined in my chair, processing his words. "Elvira," I finally said, "I appreciate your honesty. And I accept your apologies. But I hope you understand that this does not change anything in terms of the company." Elvira nodded quickly. "Oh, I know. I'm not here to ask for anything. Only, I wanted to make peace. And maybe, if possible, offer you my help. I have decades of experience in this business, contacts that could be useful." I surprised myself considering its offer. In spite of everything, Elvira was right. His experience and contacts could be invaluable. "I will think about it," I finally said. "I can't promise anything, but I will consider it." Elvira smiled, a genuine smile that had never seen him directed before me. "It's more than I expected, Claire. Thank you." After Elvira left, I sat in my office, reflecting on our conversation. It was a reminder of how much things had changed, and how much they had remained the same. The days became weeks, and the weeks in months. Under my leadership, Iberian innovations flourished. Our approach to sustainable technologies proved to be a successful decision, attracting new investors and customers equally. The expansion to Latin America was also paying fruit. I remember vividly the day we closed our first great contract in Brazil. He was in a video conference with our new team in São Paulo, all celebrating success. "We did it, boss," exclaimed Carlos, our new director of operations in Brazil. His enthusiasm was contagious, and I couldn't help smiling. "We did it together, Carlos," I replied. "This is just the beginning." That night, while looking out the window of my office towards the lights of Madrid, I reflected on everything that had happened. The road had been difficult, full of betrayals and challenges, but each obstacle had made me stronger.